Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the new episode of the Fringe podcast. If you missed last week's episode, we had a few guests with us talking about starting over. It's something that anyone can relate to, no matter where they're at in their life, because we all start over at some point. So highly encourage you to check that out if you missed last week's episode. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about confessions of being a pastor. Now, if you're not a pastor, don't tune out. There are portions of it that you will be able to relate to as well, because really these are life confessions and confessions about faith and being a human being and things that we all wrestle with.
For sure. I think there's one of my favorite little clips to watch online is like the Undercover Boss. If you guys have ever seen this, you know what I mean? It's like you have no idea what the average person is going through on their job, right? Until you go to the job, right? And so that's part of the idea for those of you that are listening or watching this. It's to take you behind the scenes of what does it look like, man? What does it look like to do this job? It is a job. It's obviously a purpose. It's a calling. It's a ministry first before any of that. But when it's your full-time situation and it requires the amount of time, what does that look like? Most people, when they think of a pastor, they think of the dude on the stage, right? Or the person that's doing counseling, or the person that is perceived in a way that they have all the answers, right? But we want to take it back to the Wizard of Oz, man. Take you behind the curtain. Little disclaimer: our confessions, our background, what it's like to look behind our curtain may be different than somebody else. So this is not a one size fit all. But yeah, we just thought it was an interesting conversation. We kind of jacked the title. Right? I mean, from that book. Isn't that where you got that?
Oh, Confessions of Being a Funeral Director?
Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it?
Oh, it's one of the best reads ever.
Who wrote that, and why did you what did you like about that?
Oh, you put me on the spot with his name. I know his first name's Caleb.
Confessions of a Funeral Director. I've always wondered,
Such a good book.
I got to tell the story while you're looking this up. I remember years ago, it was not long after I got out, and one of my first jobs, I was doing construction with my friend, Mickey. Shout out to Mickey if you're watching, if you're listening to the podcast. But we did construction, various forms of construction, framing houses. And he calls me one day. He's like, hey, we got to go replace this wall, this cinder block wall. So I'm thinking, we're going to a warehouse. We're going to some type of house, a basement or something like that. Well, we pull up, and it was a crematorium. Have I ever told you this? Mm-hmm. And those of you that haven't heard this, it's a wild story. So I had no idea where we're going. We pull up, it's a crematorium, and the wall that we had to fix was literally behind the incinerator. It was so bizarre because we've all heard about this stuff, right? But nobody gets to go back into that room. And so I was fascinated with the guy that worked there. He was like not much older than me. He's probably 25 at the time. And I'm like, bro, how do you do this job? Like, what made you get into this? You know what I mean? And so he starts talking about it, and he's telling us about, I'm not even going to go into that because I don't want to traumatize anybody, but the whole process of it was fascinating. It was crazy. And so here we are, they had to shut the thing down. And so we fixed this wall, and it just resumes afterwards. It was so strange.
Yeah. So yeah, I had to look him up on the gram. I follow him on Instagram, but his name is Caleb Wilde. I think or Wilde, maybe, Wilde. He can be found under Confessions of a Funeral Director. There are some underscores in that title. But yeah, he just writes about growing up. His family has been in the funeral business his entire life, and just normalizing and embracing death and the tendency that American culture has to avoid it, and to...
That should be an episode. We should talk about the different cultural ways to approach death. Yeah, let's do that. That might be the next little teaser. That's good. So, in regards to what we do, for those of you that don't know, we are the pastors, the bishops, the archbishops of the Fringe Church. Not really. We don't really carry those titles, but we are the founding pastors of the Fringe Church. We're located in Hamilton, Ohio, the epicenter of arts, culture, everything in the world. Like, you think London has something, you haven't been to Hamilton. It'll blow your mind. It's the land of flowing milk and honey. No, it's amazing. It's home. But yeah, we planted a church here a little over 5 years ago. And both of us, even before then, had been into in some form of ministry, serving. I used to work at a church up north. You did ministry before all that stuff in a different context. And so, let's talk about, let's first start off with, what did you think it was going to be like, right? What did you think? Because we planted independently, not because we wanted to, but, I'd reach out to church planting organizations, share our vision, share the people we feel called to reach out to, and wouldn't get any responses, no callbacks. And so, but we still felt the calling to do it. And so we did it. And so obviously there's this, if you haven't done church planting before, there's this image of, you think in your mind what it's going to be like. And then why don't you talk about that, maybe that first year, what you thought it might be like, and then what it actually ended up, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think before we go into that question, let's just give a little bit of backstory on what was the moment in your life when you knew, I'm called to be a pastor? Because there's so many people that I've met who end up in a pastoral role where when they first felt that call, they're like, you got to be kidding me. There's nothing I'd rather not do. They wanted to run from the call.
That's good.
I hear so many pastors say that, or they just felt like the least qualified person to ever be called for that role. So what was that moment for you when you first knew, this is a calling that's on my life?
It's good. It's good. I would say, honestly, if I'm keeping it 100% real, I would say probably easily 10 years before I did it. 10 years before I did it. Now, there's a lot of reasons why I didn't do it. Some of it, honestly, I probably wasn't ready looking back. Mm-hmm. You look at the story of, who was it? It was Moses, yeah. God calls Moses, right? He does a lot of shady stuff. He ends up killing this Egyptian, buries him in the sand, and then somebody confronts him and he threatens to smoke them, But he ends up with his, in the wilderness for a pretty long time. And I don't think for me, it's different for everybody, but I think for a lot of people, when God calls you, when he calls you doesn't mean that's when it's going to happen. Right? So you might be listening to this, you might be watching this, you might have a dream, a purpose, a calling, something you're trying to pursue, and bro, that's in you, this is who I am. This is absolutely something I feel a burden to do. Mm-hmm. Don't be discouraged if it doesn't happen right then and there. There was a lot of reasons why I didn't, but yeah, probably 10 years before.
Yeah.
And part of it was twofold. Part of it was life circumstance, right? There was stuff going on. I didn't feel ready. I felt like, there was a lot of reasons mm-hmm. to that. That's a whole nother episode. I would say other than feeling not ready, and I was kind of doing it in a sense. I had this little house thing going on up in Cleveland. It was just a bunch of random people from the street,
like a house church.
Yeah, like a house church, and it was fire. It was amazing. People's lives were being impacted. I still talk to a lot of people that were a part of that, But as far as actually really stepping out, I went through training. I went to church planting. Shout out to Cuyahoga Valley Baptist Church, CVCC, if I remember correctly. Shout out to Pastor Duncan, my homeboy Alan. I'll tag you in this post. But there was this church, and I wasn't, my background wasn't Baptist. I don't know what I was. I used to bounce around all different type of churches. But they had this amazing vision. Hey, there's people out there that feel called to plant churches, and we don't care what denomination they're from, what they want to do, as long as we have those core, tenets that we share. Let's equip these people and let's help them do it. And so I went through about 9 months of that, and still, again, timing, life circumstance, I wasn't ready. There's a lot to it, but I think a big part of it, and this is really what I struggle with, is I felt like I want to do that. I'm passionate about doing that. It moves me, but I don't fit the description. Mm-hmm. And so I saw all these other people in that, and they were good people that were in that class, and other pastors that I knew. I couldn't do the pastor accent, you know what I mean? Depending on what denomination you're from, there's a different one, right? I couldn't do I wear certain clothes before I come to a building, and then I have an outfit for the deal, you know what I mean? And I get, to some extent, I'm not going to wear my pajamas when I go out shopping, but all of that weird kind of cultural stuff I really struggle with. And I felt like I don't see, and I'm not saying there wasn't, but I didn't see a lot of examples of people leaning into there is no weird code switching. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would be easy to believe the lie, too, that that's the expectation that people coming to church have of you, too. And if you don't feel like you fit that, then maybe this isn't the call, or maybe I'm not supposed to do this. I could see where it would be easy to wrestle with that in your mind.
Let's go a little deeper, though. And we've talked about this. It wasn't just that. The reason why I felt that way, it all goes back to childhood. It all goes back to not feeling wanted, not feeling like I was worth sticking around for, always feeling like the black sheep, you know what I mean? And part of me getting ready and being ready to plant was, one, obviously the Lord bringing you into my life. It was getting counseling, therapy, talking about that stuff.
Yeah, healing.
Working through some of that, like, bro, like God telling me, like, I didn't make you to be anyone other than Patrick. So stop apologizing for who you are. That's not a pass to be an idiot or to sin or do evil stuff, right? But who you are as a person, how you view the world, your perception, your unique approach. Stop apologizing for it. That's the way I made you. That's what the world needs. They don't need another version of someone else. They need you to be you. And like,
well, and he knew that when you were ready to plant and start the church, that the people you would be ministering to, you were the exact person that they would need. They would need your story, your struggle, the healed version of you.
Yeah, it's good.
That's what they would need. So I'll answer that question as well. I think I told you the story of when I was still incarcerated and Chaplain John Tate looked at me one day. I don't even remember what prompted this or what was happening in the moment.
Shout out to Chaplain Tate. What up, what up? Hey, let's give him a shout out real quick before we do this. Funny backstory of this. So Chaplain John Tate, he's up at Northeast Pre-Release, I think, right now. He was actually my correction officer in the juvenile prison I was in, and then he ended up being your chaplain years later. So
yeah, full circle.
Amazing dude. Go ahead, though.
I love John Tate. When I think of people who made such a large impact on me and my spiritual growth and just unraveling all of the misperceptions I had about God, he's definitely a person who played a key role in that. But I remember him looking at me one day and he said, "Sarah, you're going to be married to a pastor one day." And I just kind of like scoffed and kind of laughed and blew it off. But I remember feeling kind of like defiant in my mind, like, I'm not going to be married to the pastor. I'm going to be the pastor. Like, this is, no, like I just never saw myself.
Is that the only child thing coming out? Like, nobody's going to tell me what to do?
Just never saw myself in that, what I viewed as this very submissive, passive, showing up for all the church event with the brownies and just this quiet, meek role, which I know that's not true, but so I think that was the first moment when it like, well, where is this feeling coming from? Like, when did I ever decide that like I wanted to be in any pastoral type role? Because I had grown up in church all of my life, but that thought had never crossed my mind. And granted, I'm not the lead pastor here. You're the one up here speaking every Sunday, but I do feel that call on my life, and I think that's still something God is preparing in me and growing in me and developing. Yeah, for sure.
Pastoring it's so much more than just talking, though, right? I mean, if you're in it for the right reason, if you have the call, you're actually not called to talk. You're called the shepherd.
The sermon part is probably the smallest part of the role, contrary to what everyone else would think.
For sure. Yeah, and that's it, but it's easier to do just talking, right? I mean, it's way easy. And there's definitely an art to it. There's an anointing to it, right? We believe in that. But there's also this element of like, hey, if I'm calling you to plant this work, I'm not just calling you to stand on a stage and come up with some clever words. I'm calling you to walk with these people. And that, bro, is going to be messy. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be all of it wrapped in one. And so, yeah, that's interesting.
So back to the question.
Yeah. That was a roundabout.
What I thought it was going to be like when we first planted. Well, I think to go back to what you previously said about how you naturally have this expectation when God plants a dream in your heart, when he gives you a vision for something, that feels big, when he calls you to something, you automatically assume it's going to be this
Immediate.
overnight
It's happening
easy
right now,
thing
tomorrow.
because this is from the Lord,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think that was a big misperception that I had, that it was going to be, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Like, no one, anytime you start something, there's going to be bumps in the road. But I had no idea how hard
Yeah.
and how much struggle there would be involved, and how often we would question, like, did we hear you right here? Like,
Yeah.
maybe we heard wrong. Like, maybe this isn't the path. I thought it would be a lot easier than
Yeah.
it was.
This is a word for somebody listening, man. When you set out, even if you are called to do it, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Like, I wish that would have, like, and there were conversations I had with people, shout out to my homeboy Troy up north. There's conversations I had with people that it's not going to be easy, but understanding, like, I remember when we first started, when we planted the church, we were meeting in the youth room, shout out to the YMCA in Hamilton, the downtown location. We were meeting in the youth room, and this room, it was wild, man. Wasn't it painted like 5 different colors? Like, each wall had a different color, but it worked out. It was great. But I remember, the whole setup, tear down, and I had helped, North Coast plant a big church and dealt with all that before. But the setup, it's different when you don't have a team. You know what I mean? They had a team because they were already an established church. I wasn't doing it by myself. I had other people that were helping. But when you're the ones carrying in the speakers, setting the stuff up, I remember buying those donuts. You know what I mean? And, like, you'd buy you take your little step of faith. You'd buy a dozen donuts and 2 people show up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, but just the constant up and down of that. There was many times, and we'll get to this in a minute. But where you just like, did I hear right?
Yeah.
Because this ain't it. This ain't it.
It was always at those moments, though, where you're literally about to fold and just call it, like, we're done. We're done here. That the Lord always sends just that word of encouragement that you need, that is enough to keep going.
For sure.
I wrote about this recently, just that prayer of give us this day our daily bread, like not praying for provision for the next week or the next month or the next 5 years, but like, what do we need today? And like, along this journey, the Lord has been faithful in doing that, like encouraging us at the lowest moments to keep going, or sending some reminder of it's not always going to be this way.
Yeah.
Giving you a glimpse of what will come. And
so struggle and questioning is part of it. That doesn't mean you weren't meant to do it. Now, for some of us, we try to do stuff we are not meant to do. Like, bro, you ain't good at that. You know what I mean? Girl, that's not your thing. You ain't cut out for that. You know what I mean? You're colorblind and you're trying to put highlights in someone's hair.
yeah.
There's that. But yeah, just the struggle of that. I mean, I remember the challenges of that, and yeah, just, and then you have people come and they go and they trickle in and they trickle out. And I think planting independently was a challenge.
Well, it felt like a really rogue thing to do. Like, if you would talk to any other pastor, I mean, we did talk to some, like, they would advise you against doing that. And I think in looking back, it's because they know, like, they're 5-10 years in, like, they know how hard the daily walk is in this ministry thing, and how important that supportive team around you is.
For sure.
And we had that, but it was people that were kind of spread out.
Yeah.
We had people who were encouraging and who were supportive and in prayer with us and agreed, like, yes, this is the call, you should do it. But they weren't here in Hamilton with us. Right.
Let's give them a shout out while we're at it. Shout out to Archbishop Pastor Tim. He's not really an archbishop, but Tim Mullins, Sarah Mullins, we appreciate you. They were hugely encouraging. My homeboy James Galea, obviously, of course, goes without saying. My homeboy Phil Evans, Casey Evans, Pastor Troy and Rebecca, man, that like core group. And even my old barber teacher from juvenile prison, I've stayed in touch with Dave. Shout out to Pastor Dave, who's now, I don't even know if he's pastoring anymore, but yeah, good dude. But we had those people.
Luke Day,
Trisha for sure. And there were people that came along after. I'm talking about like before, leading up to it. But having that crew, having that team. But, looking back, we're 5.5 years into it and digging through the scriptures and seeing the model. Like, they didn't always have that either. In the book of Acts, like, yes, they were sent out and they went out 2 by 2, but they didn't have like a plant team. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a church plant budget. You know what I mean? And I've wondered and I've struggled with this, and I'm committed to it, man. Like, as our church, and it's growing, it's popping, man. Not because we're clever, but God's moving. As our church really starts to swell and we got some serious like resources and help to work with, I'm committed. Like, when I see people, and I don't care if they're affiliated with us or not, and they're trying to do something good that God's called them to do, I want to get behind them. Because looking at the book of Acts, there were people, they went out. They didn't have this, and I'm all for strategies, but back to what I was going to say, I wonder how many people have not pursued God's purpose or call because they didn't have that. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's always indicative that you shouldn't do it. Most of the time it is. Like, it's insane, bro. Like, I forget the statistics, but the average church plant, it doesn't last very long. Most of them die. And they told us, and shout out to the guys that did the church planting course up at CVCC, but they told us, like, hey, before you do this, I want you to know that, like, most of these fail, bro. Like, they fail. Mm-hmm. And so, like, you have to get your mind around that. But yeah, I wonder how many people have missed out or haven't stepped out because they don't have, and I'm not going to name names. But there's people that I've met, people that I've heard, people that I know, they've planted churches, and they had, there was this one, I won't tell you what state it is or where it is, and I remember them talking about their launch day, because it's almost like the way a lot of people do it, and I'm not knocking, I'm not hating, but it's almost like a pyramid scheme or like some type of Super Bowl event, the launch day, Kiss is going to be playing, you know what I mean? We're going to drop 100,000 eggs from the sky on Easter, there's just all this over the top stuff. And I remember, it wasn't long after we planted, we heard about this church plant that planted this church, and they had, I forget what the number was, they were bragging online about how they had like 750 people show up at their first service.
And we had like 7.
Yeah, we had 7. And so anybody looking at, like, this is, I love this is real. Anybody who would look from the outside in would look at what we're doing, and this is no hate on that other place. They're still popping. They would look and they would say, "Well, that's the success and that's the failure." Mm-hmm. Like, there's not that many people there. You should definitely give up on that. Can you imagine what we would have missed out on? I mean, and we'll get into the impact in a little while, but like, bro, it's amazing. But I remember thinking about that, and this is part of the reason why I didn't jump into pastoring first. I'm nothing against anybody. I'm cut from a different cloth. I'm from the streets. I grew up in the hood. You know what I mean? And so when I hear that, like, the street dude in me is like, that sounds a little suspect. That sounds a little like 750 people, really, bro? And these are all new people that are just, you know what I mean? They've never came to church, and like, you just had this great idea and you had 700. And I started thinking about this, and I'm like, there's no way that those 750 people that showed up were just random people showing up. And then you find out later, these are people that were bored with other churches, and so they popped in, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is the latest, this is our culture, right? It happens everywhere, and that's nothing against that ministry. And then you find out the budget and where they came from and the money that they had for I mean, it was insane, It was insane. I mean, it was like a PR campaign for, like Starbucks or Target, the amount of money and energy that they spent. Like, of course you had that many people show up.
Yeah.
But where's the sticking point to that? And again, they're still doing good. I speak blessing on them. I pray for them. But it's like, don't think because your thing doesn't look like that thing, that means God's not in it.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And that's for, I don't care if you're planning a church or you're starting a business, bro. That applies to anything.
I heard something powerful actually just yesterday, and I want to give credit where credit is due, and no matter how you feel about this particular person, just keep your ears open. If you didn't know, we quote a lot of different people on here. That doesn't mean we 100% agree with all the person's life choices or their beliefs or whatever. But I think about that sometimes.
Truth is truth.
Truth is truth. And some of the people that I most admire in the world, I don't 100% agree with them on everything. But you still are able to say valuable. That person's still capable of saying valuable things.
It's biblical. It's biblical.
Substance, like
Paul quoted the philosophers, and the people in Mars Hill. So it's biblical. Truth is truth, man. Doesn't matter where it comes from.
So anyway, I saw a video clip yesterday on Instagram by Joyce Meyer, and she was talking about a time in her life where she was just really questioning, like, if she had heard God on something, and she was really afraid to step out on this thing because, like, what if I miss you? What if I miss you, God? And I didn't hear correctly. And she very clearly, like, felt the Lord say to her in her spirit, like, if you miss me, I'll find you.
Ooh.
Ooh. And I just, like, I felt that, like we get so focused on making sure we heard God correctly when we feel him lay something on our heart. And like, do I do this? Do I not do this? I need some other sign. Like, help me here. Like, no, if you miss him, he'll find you.
So good.
If you make the wrong turn, he knows where to find you. Like when you're genuinely trying to do the right thing and trying to follow the Lord, you can't go wrong. He's going to find you.
Commit your ways to the Lord and your plans will be established. Doesn't mean the blueprint's going to be perfect. I love that. I've always struggled with that too, because it's like when people talk about God's will, God's purpose, God's direction, his calling, it's always like this weird
mystery,
mystery, this genie thing you got to figure. If you can just line up the dots right, it's going to pop. You know what I mean? It's like some safe you got to crack. And something the Lord spoke to me years ago on that same thing was very familiar chapter of the Bible we're all familiar with, Psalms 23. There's a part in it where it says, my goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of your life. That's exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. It's going to find you.
Yeah,
it's going to find you. I love that.
That's good.
I love that.
So back to the confessions. I know something we had talked about just in trying to hash out today's podcast. The reality of people coming and people going and having to, as you said one time, love people fiercely but hold them loosely. And so let's talk a little bit about that and just the difficulty as a pastor of growing with people and learning to love people and walk with them, and then poof, one day they're gone.
Yeah.
And
the art of ghosting.
The effect that can have on you when that happens over and over and over again, as it does in ministry. I mean, you ask any pastor I know,
for sure,
talks about the hardship of that and just the human side of you that grieves and hurts when relationships are lost or people move on, and you want them to do that, right? Like, we don't own people. If people are feeling called to another church, another path, like, go. Like,
you are not being detained.
Who am I to question where the Lord is calling you to?
You're not being detained. You're free to go.
The human side of you still struggles greatly with that.
For sure.
Like, I find myself guarding myself a little bit, like with current people in our congregation, and I try not to do that, but it's hard because you wonder, like, how long do I get to keep you? You know?
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I mean, I think it applies to anybody. I think this applies to people starting businesses, people who are in school. People, we've all experienced people coming and going, and you have this. I forget where I saw this meme, but there was this photo. It was like kids playing outside, and it says, "You never knew this was the last time you would play outside together." Oh, it's so sad. So terrible, but it's true. You know what I mean?
You never knew this was the last time you would pick your child up.
Right. Yeah.
There comes a point where they're too heavy for you.
There's a video of the dad, and he's holding the baby, and then it pops, and then she's too big to hold. Like, when was that last day? Right now, shout out to one of our offspring, the Gobs. My daughter, she does not want to get out of our bed. It's killing our vibe. That'll be another episode. But she's big, man. She's 7 years old, and but I remember watching a video, and it was just talking about enjoy those moments, because you never know how quick, or you'll turn around and, like, she won't want to be in your bed. She's too cool to get in your bed. She wants to kick it with her friends. People come and go, man. People come and go. I would say for me, that's definitely probably the hardest part of ministry, of doing this. And, those of you that have been following us, that know us, know our story, our backstories. I've been doing ministry now for over 20 years. Sarah's been doing stuff for a long time as well. And so it's not like we had no idea that people come and go, but it's different when let me just say this, when you're starting something new, and this is anything, that's a lonely road. Mm-hmm. Like there's people who, I saw a video yesterday. It was Mr. Beast. Shout out to Mr. Beast. He'll be on the episode next week. Most followed guy on YouTube. No, not really. Maybe someday. But Mr. Beast was talking about how when he was starting out making videos, people thought he was delusional. And then they thought he was a genius. Mm-hmm. Right? And what was he speaking to? He was speaking to, like, when you start something out, you start a new job, a business, you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're in a new relationship, or you're creating something new, you're writing, that's oftentimes it's a lonely road, and that's part of it. And so I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this, if you got a new thing that you're starting or you're a part of it is a lonely, and pastoring, I would think that's got to be one of the most loneliest jobs on the planet, if I'm just 100% honest and real.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people know you, but not a lot of people know you. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And you have to be careful who you let into those intimate spaces. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that you're like hiding your true self, or that you have these dark secrets that you don't want the majority to. That's not what I'm saying. You have to be careful who you trust and who you let into those intimate spaces.
For sure. Yeah, because because it's a lonely road. You develop friendships with people, and if you're pastoring, or you're planting, or you started the business for the right reason, you really do care about the people that you're around, and so you get attached. You get attached to them. You build with them. A couple comes in, they're all gas, no brakes, 100% in. You know what I mean? You think, man, this is great. We don't have to do this alone, And even if you don't click on everything, you know what I mean? You're like, man, we got somebody to walk with, And then, for whatever reason, and this happened multiple times after we planted. But there was a pastor online that was talking about this recently, and he was talking about how there's people, we often think that there's people in our lives that we think are going to be with us forever, but they're not. They're not. And it doesn't matter what you do. I always joke about how it amazes me, these high school or these friends you've had since childhood, you're still connected to them. But for most people, you'll have people that'll come and go in your life. And he goes on to say, just because they aren't with you forever doesn't mean they didn't serve an important purpose in your life.
Or if the relationship ended badly, like if they hurt you in some way, like God will still use that towards accomplishing his ultimate purpose for your life, right? You look at the story of Joseph and how his brothers betrayed him and sold him, and then he ends up in a foreign country and he's falsely accused of sexual assault, right? And he ends up falsely imprisoned, but God ultimately used all of that to deliver the people of Egypt from famine, right? And for Joseph to be, what was he, second in command or something, in some high position of authority that God could use for the good.
Mm-hmm. So good. So true. So, I mean, I think that's a part of life. And I think that's what we're starting to learn is there's people that come in, and this pastor, he talked about how they're port people, right? Like a ship comes in and it brings goods and then it leaves. And there's people in your life, they're going to be port people. They're going to come, they're going to go. They're going to come in, they're going to drop something off, and then they're going to leave. And he goes on to say, just because they didn't stay planted, it doesn't mean they weren't important. And I think when you realize this, like, this is what protects you from bitterness, because it's real. I'm just going to be honest and vulnerable. It's real easy to get bitter when stuff like that happens, and it happens over and over and over. But yeah, I think seeing, like, there's something there's some good that person bring during that time. And, I one of my secret pleasures, just because I have a passion for justice. and I hate bullies. And one of my, I don't do it all the time. There's amazing police out there. Let me preface this by saying there's amazing police out there. Shout out to all the cops, COs, wardens, people that work in law enforcement, people that are military, that you do your job for the right reason. You're passionate about justice. You're making the community safer. Shout out, appreciate you. But I hate when people use their authority for the wrong reason. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter if you're a teacher, you're a pastor. This happens in churches. But one of my secret pleasures is watching these videos where some guy will get pulled over and like his rights are clearly being abused. You know, like dude didn't do anything, but he knows his rights, and so he realized he knows that like, hey, like I'm not going to let you do this to me. I'm not going to let you treat me like this because I know my rights. And the reason why I like that is I think for me, I have no idea where I was going with that. I was going somewhere really good, and I just had a brain fart. So that happens. It's all good. Moving on. It'll come back to me. Maybe it's that bright light right in my eyeballs. We're trying to get good lighting. Moving on. So let's move into this part. And so what will happen when you're doing that, when you have people that come and go, people that, you know, they just leave because it's time, right? They're seasoned, they've moved. We've had that happen with people that led worship, people that were leaders. They've moved, their life situation has changed. There's no love lost, there's no hard feelings. You have to have some thick skin to do ministry. But oftentimes what will happen is right after those moments, what will the enemy do? He'll come in and tell you, bro, you ain't got nobody.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of when you were talking about, like, he challenges the person abusing their authority, right? Trying to do something because they think they can in a routine traffic stop. But he knows his rights. And so, like, the enemy does use those moments of people leaving. You know, like, I just think of all the lies I've been told, like when that's happened in the past, like people who were consistent and faithful about coming and then all of a sudden they're not here anymore. And I don't know, just feeling like you're lacking in some way, like you need to get it together, like you're not organized enough, like you need to work on this and that. And
you failed.
That's ultimately, you failed. Yeah. And that's why they left. And
which you deal with that weekly already. And then when that happens, it's like you really failed.
Just adds to that lie. But I think when you know your rights and like you know your identity and the truth of who God says you are and who
that was a good segue,
called you to be, and like that's the counter voice.
So true.
In those moments to staying on the path and moving forward and letting go of whoever's supposed to go and who's no longer part of that journey with you.
Yeah. So good.
Knowing your rights, knowing who you are, and knowing the truth. So a couple other confessions we had talked about was just that I think there's illusions sometimes that, like, when you're a pastor, that you're the Bible answer man, right? That you never wrestle in faith, in doubt, that you never have those hard questions for God. And I do think there comes a point in your journey where those questions are less and less, and you really may be at a place of deep peace with the Lord and just trusting that whatever is unfolding in your life, like God is going to use for the good, even if it isn't good.
For sure.
But I don't ever think we arrive at a place where the right set of circumstances or the right set of pain could put you right back in a spot of having really hard questions for God. Yeah. And doubting everything and asking the whys. And if you think that could never be you, like,
you're one tragedy away.
You're one tragedy away. You're full of a lot of pride. Yeah. And you need to take a look at that.
For sure. For sure. I mean, there is an element, like, if you're going to commit your life under someone's anointing, you're going to allow this person to be your shepherd. Like, bro, I don't want to take my car to a mechanic that, like, doesn't know what he's doing. You know what I mean? He doesn't know how to fix the engine. He doesn't know how to, diagnose the problem in the situation. And so there is an element of, like, I resent the Bible answer man kind of preacher role, but there is an element like I better know that book. I better have feasted on that book for years. I better have really dug into that thing. I better have some understanding of the heart of that, of the scriptures, of who God is, God's character, his nature. Yeah, there is that. But especially in regards to the work that we do in the specific ministry that we have, like tragedy is, I hate to say this, but it's almost like a regular part of it. Like there's people that we've walked with for a long time that we've considered family that I had to do their funeral because they overdosed from heroin. And they were doing great. They had one relapse and they died.
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned this, I think it was last episode or the one before. Recently I had to do a funeral for a kid that was 14 years old that died in his sleep and his little sister found him. What do you do with that? There's no clever answer for that. I can give you all the theological, background of what you should hold on to, but oftentimes that's not the answer. The answer is to learn to be present with people. And we've learned how to do that, and we're still learning. But yeah, the idea that I have all the answers and I don't have some of the same questions, that's an illusion. And I think that's one of the things that qualifies you is your ability to admit that you don't have all the answers.
Absolutely.
I don't know about you, but I'm afraid, and I'm a little suspicious of people who never struggle. Leaders, pastors, worship leaders. There's a shout out to, I think her name is Ashley Hess. She's a new addition to part of the Maverick City worship team, and she wrote this song. What is the name of that song? Do you know the name of that song?
What are the lyrics?
Oh, it's gonna drive me nuts. But she wrote this song. I'm gonna pull it up because this is really important. She wrote this song, and it's a worship song, and I think they're up for a Grammy for it. And the video is so like uncomfortable to watch because it's not the perfect song. It's not the perfect answer. Oh, it's Don't Give Up. That's what it is. Don't Give Up. Ashley Hess, Don't Give Up. Man, look this song up. It's powerful. It's powerful. Back to what I was saying.
Is the one where she's saying, don't give up on me?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so I normally don't comment on people's stuff all like that. But like she was talking about being overwhelmed with all that stuff. And I commented, may never see it, doesn't matter. But I commented, I said, these are the kind of worship songs that we need. Like that did something to me. Because there was an honesty and a vulnerability, and you see that throughout the Bible. You don't see Jesus always just vomiting up answers at people. He oftentimes, his presence and what he does, it's not just what he says, it's what he does. And I think there's something to that. And I think, yes, I should be able to answer questions about the Bible, about who God is. What does it mean to have eternal life? What does it mean to walk with Jesus? What is sin? What is heaven? What's hell? What happened when Jesus died on the cross? What is the state of humanity? Like I should be able to answer that stuff. But when it comes to these major life struggles and tragedies, like, bro, I'm still human, and I can't play the game. That I don't wrestle with that too. But I think that is the answer. That's why we lean into who he is.
So what would you say to someone who that's the point they're at in their faith where they don't know what they believe anymore and there's more questions than they have answers for, and just a lot of doubt and shattered trust and just really questioning what they would believe or what they believe. How do they navigate that? How have you navigated that, like as a pastor, as a person?
Yeah, it's good. You admit it. You talk about it. You let it out. I heard something about the book of Job, and if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. It's a wild book in the Bible. Job was declared righteous at the end of the whole story. And if you look at his prayers, like they were so awful. Like it was like, God, kill me, God, do this, God, do that. There was so much hostility that he was expressing towards the Lord because of and he had a messed up situation. I mean, the dude had boils, his family died, he lost all of his wealth, like the worst that could ever happen. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Not only was he broke, but he had boils, you know what I mean? Like all this stuff. And he was declared righteous at the end. It wasn't his friends. And why was that? Because he he didn't stop talking to God.
Yeah, we saw this powerful video recently of a woman walking through a season of grief, and she was talking about how what her grief had taught her in relationship to God is that trust looks like honesty.
Yes, that's it.
The highest level of trust that you can give to God is not having your beliefs all lined up perfectly, having all the answers, having it all figured out.
So good.
It's full honesty. Like, I trust you enough to give you the messiness of my honesty, the rawness.
And that's really the heart of the church, right? We want people to be able to come in, and this is a place where you can pour that out. We're not gonna judge or throw up.
We get a lot of flack for that. Like, a lot of people think we're the come as you are, stay as you are kind of church, and that's definitely not the case. We believe that God meets people where they're at.
Ooh, let's talk about this.
Come as you are, no matter what state you're in, no matter what your beliefs are, no matter if you're drunk and you're falling over on the front row.
Which that happens.
That has happened. We want you here.
Yes.
But we believe that God and his timing and in a way that only he can do will transform you if you just keep drawing near to him.
Yeah.
It's not our job to change you, because that's work that we can't do. But if you keep drawing near to the Lord, if we keep pointing you in his direction,
so good.
The proximity will change you.
Yes. I want to finish with this. We're not done now, but you open up something that we got to speak on. We have to. We don't speak on it enough. One of the other things that we've struggled with is public outside perception that people have of the church. Mostly people who profess to be Christians, but it's other people too. Perceptions that everything that you just mentioned, they're judging something. They're judging the outside of something that they've never been in. They've never been in it. You know, I shared the story recently about some woman that came into the shop and asked if we were part of a cult. You know, people have said that before. You know, so I asked him, hey, have you ever been there? What service did you come to? You know, because I want to know if there's some tweakage going on. You know what I mean? We got to address that. No, I just heard. I read online. You know, and there's all these perceptions about who we are because of the people that God is bringing to our church. And let me just say, I want to say this clear. I want to shout it from the rooftop. You're never going to catch me apologizing for the people that we have in our church. I'm not doing it. I'm not ashamed of them. I'm not embarrassed of them. I'm not like trying to hide and not be seen. No, bro, you can see me in public with these people because I believe 100% that these people, Jesus loves them and he's doing a work in their life. And I heard a pastor put it this way. What happens is people from the outside, they look in and they because we don't talk a certain way, we don't brag about the salvations that are happening in the church. They perceive what we do because it's different, because it looks different, because the way the ministry fleshes out is different. They judge it. What oftentimes what religious people want to do is if somebody's in the depths of darkness, they want to bring them up too quick. And what happens when you bring somebody up too quick that's in the water? Pass out, or you can kill them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's not how transformation happens. We got to give people time to come up to the surface.
That's good analogy.
And so that's our heart. So just because you see somebody doing this or somebody doing that, or this person's here or that person's there, it doesn't mean that they're not coming up from the depths, homie. You don't know how deep they were. You don't know how dark they were. You don't know how far below the surface that they were. And so, yeah, we're committed to however long it takes for you to come up. We're still pulling you up, bro. Like, don't get it twisted. I ain't telling you, hey, that's great down there. No, bro, there's great whites down there. You know what I mean? There's colossal squid down there that'll tear you up. God's calling you to the surface. You know what I mean? But we're not going to bring you up so quick that you die in the process, right? And that's not how that change didn't happen like that for me. It didn't happen overnight. I didn't stop doing XYZ overnight. It took time. Yeah. It took time. And so there's these perceptions, the rumors, the gossip. I mean, there's been some stories told about us, and I'm not even going to get into the specifics. They are so outlandish. It's like something you would see or hear on TV, and it's like, who in the world did you hear this from? You know, who did you hear this from? It's hilarious. It's part of it. It's part of it.
And I think at some points, like, it's been so crazy and so heavy with that kind of stuff that is the encouragement. Because you know that if you weren't on to something good, if you weren't in the right lane, if you weren't truly in the path that God has for you, and there weren't a lot of good things ahead, there wouldn't be so much opposition.
Facts.
You know?
So good. So if you're starting a new work, new business, new church, you're right, and you're creating something, and there's opposition, there's naysayers, bro. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to do that. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to do that. Finally, we'll close off on this confessions of pastors. We're rich because we pastor, aren't we? I mean, we've come into ministry to. We've come into a windfall, haven't we?
For wealth.
Yeah. It's funny. It's amazing. People think It's amazing the assumptions that people have. They think that whatever it's not really in our church, but the public in general, and oftentimes sometimes people that wander in, they think that whatever goes into that little offering thing is going into our pocket. You know what I mean? I'm like, bro, do you not see these lights on? Do you not see the size of this building, the heat?
Well, not to rabbit trail, but some of that is some of the toxic stuff that you see in
they've seen people
mega church
for sure,
pastors, and living in excess.
Because some people have abused that, and there's good churches and massive churches out there that are doing the right thing. But
and hopefully, like if your church is growing to a place where it's healthy and you're able to support all the mission and ministry work going on, like your pastor should be taken care of. Like that's their lead role. But everything we have in our life outside of here, like when it comes to belongings or being able to travel, like it's because we work full-time jobs outside of here.
Yeah.
It's I hope to be able to see you one day transition to where you can do less of that, and you have been able to slowly over time, but we work full-time hard outside of this whole ministry thing too. And
I mean, how many times during this process have I not worked one or two other jobs? Or you? The whole time. The whole time.
We're 5 years in.
Yeah. So the illusion, and I think, and I do believe we're coming out of that slowly, very, very slowly.
A few other confessions, like sometimes we don't want to get up on Sunday morning either.
There you go.
Sometimes you
mean I don't wake up bouncing?
Don't feel like talking to people, right? Mm-hmm. Like these are things pastors experience as well, but
sometimes you want to be asked. You show up
anyway, and I've never shown up anyway and not been glad that I did.
Yeah. And sometimes you want to be asked how you're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? How are you doing? How is your life? Is there anything that you need prayer for? Because you're always the resource for people. But I think some of the ways you don't burn out on that stuff, and again, this takes time to learn, but even with people coming and going like we were talking about earlier, or being burned out on stuff that you just mentioned, it's realizing that people are not the source and we are not the source. And if I'm doing this in my own energy and my own strength, like you're gonna be burned out, and I've been there. I've gone through it.
I've said that before too. Like those moments where I just really want to quit and I feel so burnt out and just tired. There's usually a disconnect spiritually.
Yeah.
Where I've wandered a little bit or not been as faithful in like seeking the Lord daily in that daily communication and just really abiding and resting in Him. That's usually what's going on. Is there's a disconnect.
For sure. Something else too, I think, and a lot of this was during the pandemic, but everything that happened with the pandemic, the volatile political climate we were living in, which we're coming into another one. Aren't you so excited about that? You're supposed to have all the answers, and you can never please everybody, right? And so this pressure that you feel to appease everybody, and you and I both have been through too much in life to be ruled by that, and we don't operate that way. But that means there's going to be some hostility when you refuse to, play the game.
It's an unfair expectation, an unfair amount of pressure for someone to put on you.
Yeah. And I think that, just the unrealistic expectation that there's sometimes that you should be allowed sometimes to get it wrong. maybe that sermon wasn't that great, maybe the music was horrible that week, maybe my position on this cultural issue was a little off, we judge our pastors higher than we judge ourselves, right? And if there's anything I can encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're not a part of our posse, of our congregation, you're part of another church, man, just give them dudes some grace. Give them some grace. Give them, the men, the women, the people that lead, give them some grace. Check on them. See how they're doing. Hey, man, how's your family? When's the last time you guys spent some time together? When's the last time you guys had a date night? Something powerful you could do for your leaders, man, and we've had people do this. They got us a gift card to go have a date, something simple like that. But yeah, it's some of the other misconceptions, and we'll wrap up with this. And I wouldn't even say misconceptions or confessions. With all that challenging, hard stuff, there has been some amazing, beautiful stuff we've been able to see. And I had no idea the beauty that we would see, the life transformation we would see. I knew God called us to do it, and I knew there would be some stuff along the way. I had no idea we would survive as a church what we've survived, and we're still here.
Yeah.
The first day we planted the church, it was August 4th or 5th, 2000 and
August
what?
5th, 2018.
18. As we were walking into the YMCA, I don't know if you remember this, I got a picture of it. There was a concrete sidewalk, and there was literally a flower that was growing out of the concrete.
I remember that.
Now, those of you that know me, I'm a Tupac fan, love Pac. Again, not everything he stood for, but that dude was something else. And he's got this poem called A Rose That Grew from Concrete. And it talks about his life, how he should have never been able to overcome and achieve some of the stuff that he achieved because his life, it was like a rose trying to grow out of concrete, but he still grew. And I had no idea, right? If I could confess something, I had no idea that wasn't the only flower that was going to come out of that ground. And there were going to be circumstances and things that were going to try to cement us over, but they have no power over what God's doing. Mm-hmm. And every time a new truck pulls up to try to dump something on us or dump something on our people, God breaks forth in power and beauty, man.
That's the reason you keep going on those days you want to quit. It's the people. If we quit this, like, God is faithful. Like, God's going to finish every good work he starts. He's going to plant them with someone else. He's going to provide someone else for them. But then we miss out on getting to participate with him in his redemption for the world, for the people who come here.
Yeah. It's his sandbox, but we get to play in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So whatever it is that you want to do, my brother, my sister, as we wrap up this episode of the Fringe podcast, you got a dream, you got a purpose, you got a calling, you got something burning inside you. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean there won't be times that you're ghosted. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to understand. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be opposition.
Doesn't mean you're not going to want to quit.
It doesn't mean you're not going to want to quit. You may start that thing and 2 people show up and 750 people show up to the other thing. It doesn't mean it ain't going to pop off, and it's popping, and we give God the glory for that. It's amazing. The church is booming, not because we're clever. We're thinking about what are we going to do about space. We're running out of space. That's because God, He completes the work He started. And so if there's any final word I could leave you with, is God will never start something in you He will not complete. Just hold on. It's whitewater rafting out here, homie. You're going to get sucker punched in the throat a couple times, but keep paddling, man. He's with you.
It's going to be fun, too, though.
And it'll be fun. Yeah, it's not all bad. There's a lot of amazing stuff. So grace and peace. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Fringe podcast. We will see you soon. Grace and peace.
See ya.